Awesome. Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia. I'm one of the chief adjudicators for this Euros, and I will be opening the St. Andrews Academy. First note, I will not have a presentation because I don't think it's a topic which require you to have some specific knowledge or some specific notes. I just think it's more important to understand or to have it interactive. If you have any questions or if you have any scenarios which you want to discuss or some doubts. The second thing is I want you to listen with a nuance because some stuff which I will be including will be presumably a little bit more advanced and they are not to be used at any time or like always in the debates, but they're quite specific. So be mindful about this. And third of all, I hope you will find it useful. It's also not the only resource which will be existing online about this topic. There is definitely one which I will recommend as well, which is from Madrid EUDC. It's on Madrid EUDC channel. It's a discussion where was Lucia, Jason, myself, and I think a couple other people when we were discussing judging and judging philosophy. But also I hope we will find the recording from the Glasgow panel, and I hope it will not be repetitive for people who participated in the Glasgow judging session. If you want, you can turn on your cameras. That's always encouraged. If not, also feel free to not do it. So I will give like a quick roundup of like theory of judging, why we are giving like notes and how we should justify them and why giving feedback or like commenting on feedback or fitting into this criteria. It's important, a couple of scenarios, and then we can do Q&A. I think for this workshop, it can be even more expensive than 15 minutes. As I said, this is the nature of the topic. So I think, first of all, in terms of judging, sometimes we are saying that there are never like, perfect methods to give to make a prep time for the debate. There is never perfect structure to give the speech, but there are recommended things which allow you to control if you are actually delivering what people are expecting. And I think what you are expected to do in OA or when you are a panelist, regardless, it's to keep things clear. Like the clarity, it's something which allow you to not get lost, for teams to not get lost in your OA. And I think allows you to track the time that you are being efficient. What does it mean? I think you have a duty to compare 4 teams between each other. Technically, you also have a duty to compare them all. Sometimes you can use certain comparison and said, look, based on what I said, that also means that the other team fell into this place. But in general, on average, you should spend equal amount of time on each teams. That means that both during the deliberation, when you are leading the panel, you should have the timer on. And both when you're giving the OA, you should have the timer on. Because the perfect time which you are making a deliberation, which I think it's assumed for like a 3 people panel, it's like 15 minutes, right? Then you have like this 5 miscalculations for like speaks and other stuff, which usually you are getting at the major. But if you will spend too much time on one comparison, and if you will run for 9 minutes, then obviously you will spend less time on the other comparison. Sometimes the other comparison, it's simpler, it's easier, but keep in mind that then you will not get your panelists' input. So for example, you are a chair and you have 2 panelists. You have doubts on one comparison, let's say on the top half between OG and OO, you agree on the rest. Even if obviously it's important to prioritize the one which you disagree to come up to the decision, if you will not collaborate and like if you will not get any thoughts about the other ranking, it's hard for you to give a feedback for the panelists, right? Because what we will say, yeah, they had the correct call, but the question is, did they have the correct call because of the rationale? Did they have the correct call because of the intuition, but maybe there's a nuance? Would they be capable to give the away if they would be the chair, if you would disconnect or if you will feel bad? You don't know this, right? That's why it's important that even if you have consensus on certain position, it's still important to find out what was the criteria for the consensus if people did that well. The second thing is on the keeping track on time, that sometimes you will have more contentious comparisons. And if you will be like, oh, no, I need to have consensus on this one, splits are fine. Like not agreeing and sometimes outvoting or being outvoted, it's not the end of the world. That just means that presumably the majority of the panel didn't understood the case the way, maybe it wasn't clearly presented. It's very rarely the situation that both panelists magically will be biased against the team because of particular characteristics, right? And then I think if they are biased and if you know how to argue with that kind of people, if to explain the things, it's likely that you are able to decrease this bias. But second of all, it's unclear if you will be only biased, if you will be biased, like, to the multiple teams in the debate as a panelist. Therefore, let's assume like a goodwill. Sometimes maybe your tracking was off. Sometimes maybe you were personally biased because you said this motion, or maybe you have preferences, or sometimes maybe some cases were a bit more intuitive for you than for the other team. Sometimes it's good to give up in the discussion and move on. And later, if you don't feel comfortable with the decision which was made for you, give your panelists ability to explain the clash, but move on to the next clash that at least some of the discussion will still be on track, right? So the conclusion out of this is A, always keep time and don't lie to people, because our top team is very, very smart for you. So they will know when you start the deliberation, they will have volunteers telling that. And if you will be going significantly over time, you might have problems and it will not be good. Obviously, as I said, at Euros, usually there is this 20 minutes, but keep in mind that you shouldn't go way beyond this. The second thing, and to the conclusion, is try to compare all teams, try to get the input on all comparisons, especially because sometimes you might have the same call, but then you are like, no, I gave them the same call because I think this mechanism was stronger. And the other person is like, oh no, this mechanism I didn't buy at all. I just think that the engagement was good. And then you are like, yeah, wait a minute, but why you didn't buy the case? So I think it's also triggered the discussion and allow you to get more nuance and allow you to get a little bit better. So this is from like the chair perspective, like the basics about like keeping time and the justification why it should be done. The second thing is there are two types of chairs. There are chairs who are interventionist and there are chairs who are letting the discussion be. I would say that you are being a bit more interventionist if you need to. So look, you will still have 15 minutes to explain your opinion, right? You will still be capable to tell teams what happened. But sometimes if you will tell panelists your call, or if you will be too much intervening in the call, some people will think that because of the seniority, they need to respond in the particular key because then you will get better feedback, or then, you will like them a bit better. Therefore, I support the way that sometimes you don't reveal your call as a chair, but that doesn't mean that you are being like, waiting for what will happen, but you're asking specific leading questions for people to think about it, right? So even if they are having good initial, you are not necessarily ensuring them, but you are checking if they know why this initial is good. So for example, if you have two panelists, the call is close, you technically leading to one of them, you are like, okay, tell me on which criteria or like on which metric, do you think it was explicitly weighted? And they're saying, no, it wasn't. And then you are like, okay, if it wasn't explicitly, then what motivated you to still buy into it? And then you can hear, maybe it was more intuitive for me. Maybe it was connected to rebuttal. Maybe the analysis was stronger, right? So again, this is the way to get a bit more nuance out of the comparison and make people also being responsible and justified for some of their thoughts. The second thing is, please do not punish people for having wrong initial call. Sometimes people will tell you, okay, my initial call is dependent on how we are reading CG, but X, Y, Z, right? Or sometimes people are just being convinced in the discussion because they realize that they had different predisposition. I think there was one of the competitions when I heard that if you had a different initial call, but you were amazing in the discussion, then you can't get past 7 as a judge, which it's weird, right? I think the initial call is not something which is set in stone. We are able to change our decisions. We are the ones to be able to be persuaded. So that's totally fine. If initially it didn't work out, but you want to find out what initially triggered this, right? And then when you are feeling the feedback, you might say that judge was good. Sometimes might have tendency to buy a little bit better to like the top half or to back half, or sometimes don't credit the analysis. But this information already tell the CA team, so when I will be testing this person, or when the person will be judging the next debate, I want to see if there is a pattern, right? I want to see if there is something which we can figure out, if there is any feedback which I can pass to the judge later. Because I want to make you aware as well that what's happening during the major, it's not the only important thing, But after, everyone is asking, hey, can I get feedback, how I can improve? And then, because you have 9 rounds, you have a lot of data potentially to collect. And there is a lot of CAs, DCAs, but ultimately, one person will not be able to see everyone. You want to combine this data and you want to put, some points. And then it's important that you know what are these points that you can help people improve in the future, or also CAs to spot the trends, what need to be addressed in the judge test, what can be changes into the judge manual, what are the things which could be done. That being said, I think all of this information is a bit of a judging philosophy pro tips, but also the things which are justified, which you shouldn't be afraid to do. The second part, before I will move on to like the how to get a 10 from deliberation and DOA, which is like the main topic of the workshop, I want to talk about something else. So this is something which you need to do if you feel confident, A, and B, if there is a situation in the round which allow you. The first thing is when you are giving DOA, after each comparison, ask people if they have questions. But please do not ask people if they have questions if you are not ready to respond to these questions, right? So if you, after the deliberation, like the deliberation were super heated and the comparisons were super close, that it took you some time to think, and there were some clashes, or like that some of the teams might be a bit upset about the call, or you think it was very, very close. Sometimes it's better to respond to the questions after DOA. After you finish all of the comparisons, you clear your head, and then you are better capable. Because A, if people start asking you questions after each comparison and you are unable to respond, or if your response generates another question and another, you're destroying the structure of DOA. Teams are getting angry because you can't move on, you're creating a delay, and also you're losing confidence, you're getting stressed, you're getting nervous. So don't do it if you're not confident. But if you are super confident in your call, if you think that, yes, my decision is clear, I have great notes, I know how to justify and respond to the teams, just say after like top half, do you have any questions to the rationale which I gave? Maybe you missed something, right? Maybe it happened to me sometimes that I'm giving the rationale on the clashes which are important, and sometimes I'm dropping the point which one team pretended was important, but maybe I thought it was under-analyzed and I just want to finish, on time. And then I'm getting reading feedback on myself and it's like, judge didn't mention this point. Yes, I didn't mention, but it would not change the call. It's not like I didn't listen to you. There were just issues with this argument, but it wasn't vital for the call and I skipped this. But if I would ask them, and if they would be like, oh yeah, what about this argument? Because you didn't say anything about it, I would be capable to still address it, which means that I would be preventing potential like anger, or like people feeling that I didn't listen to them. Because not everyone, after they're upset, after they're stressed, after they're angry, will come to you for personal feedback. Trust me. Like if I'm salty, I'm also not going to get personal feedback because I will be arguing with the judges and it's counterproductive, right? So you want to prevent the teams that they all go out of the room and like, I get third, 2 or like 4, terrible judge, like they didn't credit us, right? So you want to psychologically be prepared whatever will happen. The second thing is teams hate if they are getting lower place when you tell them, oh, this needed more analysis, or oh, you were derivative, because they are like, I spent 7 minutes and 15 seconds of my speech. Maybe there were bits which were derivative, but hello, have you like, what was derivative? Or, oh, great, more analysis. On what? Like, I already gave this. I'm not sure why it was contentious. I'm not sure why you didn't want my analysis. Here, some judges will be like, okay, here, it didn't affect the call, but your case would be stronger if you would do X, Y, Z, because even without the op rebutting this or responding, this claim it's not proven to the fullest extent. However, not all teams will be sympathetic to that way of giving OA, or they will just filter information. They will not listen, or they didn't affect the call, and they will put you comment, judge was interventionist, because they were putting some stuff which like, were not part of the debate. So you need to be careful about this. And you need to be very, very specific. For example, if you are CA at the tournament and you might be before Euros, right? Who knows what will happen? Or like if you are running a training for your society, you might say, look, guys, this time I will include the personal feedback and advices for improvement because I'm running short on time. I think I will probably be doing this at Euros, to be honest, when I will be judging, because I will need to jump to the tab room and then it will be very hard to find me to get the personal feedback. And even if I can be aware that it might slightly affect my score, because then how I can be a 10 if I'm including, personal feedback to the rational. But this is out of the necessity. But sometimes it might help you, right? Because teams want to know immediately what I could do better to convince you, what was missing in this argument. Sometimes it's good to say, here is what you told me, here is what off responded, here's what you should have told me more for this claim to be credited, but you need to, again, be very careful on what language you are using to make this particular claims. The second thing is how to get, now moving to the final topic on the discussion, is how to get this 10. It's, I think, a couple of points, right? A, there is a tendency that people don't like to wait for a call forever. So if you will drag your panel for 45 minutes and then they will be unhappy of the call, they will affect your score. Will that be fair and justified? To some extent, yes, because it affects your time management. It makes all of the other rooms were capable to came to the decision. Maybe some people were rolled, maybe some people were outvoted, but for some reason your room needed 45 minutes and then you are coming in and you are still not giving the team the place which they think they deserve. That kind of make them a bit angry. So that's why we are trying to keep on time, because it's also very hard to discredit this from the CA perspective. Like we can give a little bit less weight to this later when we are reading the comment that our judge was slow, but still it's your responsibility to kind of, fit into the framework of judging. So firstly, we are trying to keep on time the deliberation. The second thing is, and this is my recommendation, this is not something which we force people to do, I would recommend you to go through the debate chronologically. OG, OO, CG, CO. The reason for this is that if you will start from first, second, or third or fourth, that is very likely that you will start explaining the things which maybe not happened yet in the debate. I quite frankly have a big problem understanding the judges who are starting the debate without telling me what OG brought to the debate, which was the basis of all of the other teams, how they interacted. OG is basis for OO, what they're doing, for CG and for CO. So if you are starting talking from the back half or from the golf bench, like obviously OO also integrated in the debate, right? OO also impacted how CG engaged, how CG responded, and what CG extension was, because maybe it was responsive engagement. Therefore, I think if you're starting from the other positions or if you're starting from the mess, it's very likely that you will miss something, or there will be bits of your OA before you will reach the point which you need to explain, which will not be understood for the teams. They don't have access to your notes. They had no access to your discussion. They're obviously biased towards their content and they have access to what they wrote out of the debate. Therefore, my first recommendation on how to get it in is to go chronologically, that everyone know what happened in the debate. Second of all, please do not be descriptive and not give people a summary of the debate. The whips were there already. They probably gave it off whip, then up whip, then the panel. I see your question, just finish the sentence. I will just finish the sentence. So presumably they want a wrap up of flagging. You don't need to repeat. Sometimes you repeat because you want to point out that they missed, they went from point A to B, missed C, and then reached the impact there, right? So sometimes you also need to be very clear that there is some additional observations being added from you and that you are not repeating too much of what happened in the debate. Because imagine that you are starting being descriptive what PM brought to the debate. The expectation from all of the other teams is, oh my God, if the PM took so long, then we will hear LO, DPM, DLO, go whip. If you are CO, you already lost your attention and lost track of what's happening. And you don't want people to zone out and you don't want people to disconnect from your OA because then they will miss the parts of your OA which will be relevant, and then they will be salty, they will be mad, or they will just not know how your decision came in. But B as well, you will not make it on time. Let's say you will waste minutes to summarize each speaker contribution to the debate. That's 8 minutes out of your OA. That seems like quite a lot, right? So I think it's good to refer to the material and to refer with the words which the speakers use. And this is presumably one of the most important advices which I can give you, because even if you think you are paraphrasing well, or even if you think that you understood the speaker well, it might not be the same. It happened to me one of the tournaments which I didn't break at in Asia. That was already when I, was breaking regularly. So it was very like sad for me. The comment was that the speakers feel that I'm not giving them feedback on their material, but on my interpretation of their material, which they were pissed off. Therefore, sometimes you might say, look, here is what you said. I understood it that way. If you wanted to say this case, here's what I think could be more beneficial. Or sometimes even like make it less efficient. Use the words which the teams used, but at least they will feel, she or he listened. Like Klaudia listened to me. She knew that was my point. She repeated this. It's not like she gave me her interpretation. Okay. So now it's a good moment for the question. I think, Mustafa, was you? Hello.
I hope I'm audible to you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. My question was in this particular point here that most of the teams are mostly concerned about what they say here, and they mostly try to understand from the OA that how basically their particular points, which are mostly small or not in not in the on class, but they still want to try to understand here. But the problem is the intermediate judges who at least know about the judging factors and know how to only cater about the off on class, which means which are mainly concerned in the particular debate or where most of the teams are mutually agree here. They judge in that particular way, it's okay. But the problem is most of the judges, especially me, I don't know how to basically concern those factors because I am judging
Are you starting cutting off? Just to
those
be clear.
perspectives in my head. Sorry.
You were cutting off by the end. So just give me like a summary in one sentence of your question that will feel, because I heard the beginning, I think I know where you're going. Just
my question is, we can't, as an intermediate judge, I can't basically transfer those internal thoughts into in oral adjudication. So that's the reason we can't even if we want to try, we can't touch those sort of off clash point or those sort of small concerns that teams are trying to showing on, but still end of the day trying to showing the same off clash or basically the contradiction, which is legitimate, but team don't understand here. So what were the drills we can use here in order to touch those sort of small clashes that teams are unnecessarily concerned here?
Okay.
Because look, teams only cater of their feedbacks or their cases, not anything.
Yeah, okay. I think that's fair. I think that's a fair question. That's a good question. So firstly, if you look for the judging manual, what you should focus on, it's like you first need to take into account what teams explicitly considered as important. Usually that means that also they spend the biggest amount of time in their speeches, even if they didn't use the word, oh, I think the most important question is this one. But you can see if the speaker spent 2 or 3 minutes on a particular clash, presumably this is something which they prioritize, right? So take a focus on and be like, okay, guys, so this is the first clash which all of the speakers considered as important. All of the speakers were discussing this stakeholder. Let's discuss this. The second clash which I will discuss, some of the teams mentioned this clash, some other teams not. I will mention it because the 2 teams, for example, told me why it's important. And then potentially, if they were focusing the biggest amount of time on these 2 clashes, that's something which determined the debate. So if you are not sure yet how to include the third one, the smaller clash, or like how to organize your thoughts, you might always said, look, I know you had other material. I know you were discussing the other clashes, but I'm happy to discuss this in a personal feedback. I'm happy to give you advices. I'm happy to address how I read this, but this material did not impact the call. Is this responding to your question? Is this helpful?
Yes. I was trying to knowing about how what are the drills this we can use to address this sort of questions.
Yeah, so I think this is the drill, right? I think the drill is firstly to get rid of the things which teams were running and the most important stuff. And then when you are organizing your own notes, be like, okay, here is like, new clash or potential new material. Usually the best part, it's when you are taking notes, usually speakers taking like, 30 seconds between speeches because you need to stand up, you need to go to the podium, or like you need to check your audibility, or you need to organize your notes. So take this time, take the separate sheet of paper, divide the sheet of paper for like 8 small parts or like 4 small parts for each team, and try to mark what their headline, what they tried to prove was. So for example, PM stood up and said, we will have 3 arguments, X, Y, Z, and my partner will be talking about the D1. So you are noting 4 sentences, right? And then you are checking which of the sentences made it to the clash, or like which of the sentences were actually developed. And if you're saying, okay, the third one from PM was completely dropped. Like no one engaged, the DPM didn't rebuild, the back half ignored, but it was some material which you had some thoughts. For example, it could be winning material, or for example, you might think that it was stupid case, for example, not fitted to the motion or off clash. So in that case, you are like, all right, that one happened, but it wasn't very important, right? But at least you have some tracking, you have some record of this, and therefore you are capable to know how to deal with this material. So I hope it will be helpful. Which also kind of explain to you what's the good thing for tracking to give your OA, right? So you have your own sheet when you are putting tracking. My recommendation is track as much as possible. I unfortunately needed to switch for a laptop, which I think is my biggest personal failure because I hate debating from laptop and on laptop. But unfortunately, with the speaker speaking faster or like with my handwriting going to shit, I realized at some point that it will be very hard for me to come back to my notes. But also WSDC and prepped cases, it's also like, so when I'm tracking, obviously I'm not using all of these notes to give my OA, but later when people ask me specific questions, for example, what about this impact, which I ran in like 30 minutes of my case, right? Or like, what about this weighing, which I provided? I'm like, wait a second, are you calling this rebuttal a weighing? Like, in which moment it was? Because even the best speakers sometimes are like, now I will provide weighing. I'm like, no, it's rebuttal. Like, this is not a weighing. So in that case, if you're tracking a lot and if you're putting a lot of notes, later you are very efficient in the discussion and speakers have a hard time to challenge you. The worst scenario is if the speaker came to you and it's like, what about this? Like, 2 examples which I gave in my speech, and you are like, sorry, I didn't catch them. Then you gave them possibility to write in your feedback, terrible tracking, they don't know what they're doing, right? So even if it would be unjustified because presumably you tracked a lot and maybe it wasn't the most important thing in the debate, I'm just giving you the tips how to avoid that kind of situation or how to handle scenarios like this. So to summarize from this shorter block, when you are taking a notes, it's good to have the separate sheet when you're putting like, what teams tried to prove, what teams wanted to do. And then you are capable to track what to focus on, what still come back to, what to mention in personal feedback, and how to address the teams. And the second thing is, please track a lot, please make a lot of notes. I also can tell you from the story from quarterfinal at Vietnam Worlds this year, the debate was so close that we were comparing one-liner responses and weighings, which one will be the determined. And thank God we had the people in the panel who were tracking every single word from the debate, which were capable to verify if we all are on the same page. Sometimes it's important, and specifically, some speakers have different style, and it's not the fault of the judges sometimes that they are unable to get used to the style very quickly. It happened to me when I was starting judging. For me, some of the British accent speakers were extremely hard to track, and I was literally starting my deliberation when I was a panelist of, I'm really sorry, I think this is the winning case in the debate, but you need to tell me if members said this, because this is where I understood, please fill me in. And then if someone have a note and they can, and I can pick up that there were exactly the words, I just missed the links in between, I'm capable to be persuaded. So both your panelists will be persuaded, even if initially they were unable to track, but you were, but also the teams and the speakers, and it will be helpful in order to navigate, or in order to manage that part. Are there any questions to any of this? All right.
Yeah.
Go. Firstly, Kay, I think, was the hand raised, and then Owen. So, Kay, go on.
I was wondering if while you are tracking, there are particular patterns of the kinds of notes you will make on your paper that's specifically for tracking, that either like weighs something more heavily, or like points out for yourself that this thing might have missed like a logic gap or something like that.
Oh yeah, I have very funny ways of tracking. So for example, for me, contradiction, it's a storm. I don't know why. It's just like I'm having this small, like, storm sign with an arrow, just to show that there is a tension, that there is some spark there, which I will need to come back and examine. If, for example, I'm listening to closing and I feel that the reasoning is very similar to opening, I'm literally putting a bracket and I'm putting OO, for example, if this was OO, right? Or there. Or if I have a rebuttal, which I think it's just mitigatory, or if I think it's competing analysis, I'm sometimes writing so what, or like and, or like 3 dots, or like where the analysis is missing, I'm putting 3 dots. The reason why it's good with the infographics, or like, the stuff which very quickly you catch on the paper, it's during deliberation, you are very easy to see. Or like when someone is giving extension, I'm writing ext and I'm putting that in a circle, because then when I'm discussing, and for example, my chair asking me, okay, what was extension of CG? I'm like, here is what they called extension. I would also consider this part of rebuttal. Or like if you're asking, was there any weighing? And I'm like, yeah, they had this weighing. It was not persuasive. It was quite weak, or like it was derivative, but it was there. It gave you more efficient way to look through your notes. So I'm definitely doing annotations, but I think there are multiple different styles how people are taking notes. I saw through my wing career, because I had a very long wing career, it was great. So many, I saw people who had the graphs, out of the debate. They had the claim in the middle, then the engagement were like a sun going into all directions. Some of the people were literally writing a whip speech before they were giving OA to check what happened in the debate and how things interacted, how they would whip the debate. Like there are so many different styles. I think definitely you need to have some way. So either underlining the mechanisms that you think are important, either greening, so sometimes the easiest way is constructive material, which you like green, destructive material, which you like red, things which are derivative yellow. I don't know, like you also don't want to make a canva or like painting on your sheet of paper. You want to read your notes, but definitely find your way which will be easy for you to understand and refer in your paper, and I think it would be helpful. Good. Awesome. Owen, you are next.
Yeah. So I guess like asking a question about your advice to kind of track like as much as possible. I've found in the past that it's been helpful to kind of make it a target to like I guess write as little as possible, because it makes me like really actively think about what the team's contributions are, and trying to evaluate the debate as it's going. So I guess like what would be your advice on like how to kind of manage both evaluating like the debate as it's going, as well as trying to like write down everything without having to just think about word for word what they're saying?
So this is a very good question. It's usually why, if there is a motion of particular CA, why you are looking to have a strong panelist, or why sometimes you are sitting out this motion because you overthink all of the sides. Particularly, you have certain, predisposition, or like you have certain expectations from the round, which might be hurtful. As a judge, I would say that ideally, I would not think about it during prep. I would not discuss with other judges and people what would be your expectations. Although sometimes it didn't hurt people. So I would say on average, you shouldn't be discussing because it might influence your expectations, or what do you think will be good in the debate, or how you will be like, having some predispositions to the cases. If you spend 15 minutes on a cigarette before the round being like, this motion is so up heavy, there is no back half, obviously it will impact how you are reading to the debate, right? You are listening to the prop and you are like, yeah, this is good, but the op case, it's so obvious. And then sometimes you have a tendency that even if, op will just say what you were thinking initially, but they were not developed this, you are like, yeah, that's correct case. So we are trying to avoid this. So I would say on average, try to avoid thinking before the round. During the round, when you're evaluating the claims, if you're tracking well, this problem it's less severe, right? Because you are tracking what people are saying, you are not writing down your thoughts, like your argumentation, your examples. Sometimes you might write your comments separately. So if you want to think about the round as the round is going and evaluate the round by yourself, just be very, very clear in your notes which things were said by the speakers, which words are your interpretation, or what is your feedback. For example, you have one sheet for what's happening in the debate, and you have this sheet with like, what each team brought. You can have below column with like, a star or whatever, like a symbol, hashtag, whatever you prefer, being like personal feedback. Here is how I would advance this argument, or here is the stakeholder, which I think this speaker could use because the mechanism applied to that. And then you have it on the sheet, which is not the speaker's words, but it's your interpretation and it's your elaboration, which you are not mixing the two. Because if you will be mixing the two, then speakers will not like you. And therefore, you also want to avoid that kind of situation, right? Is this helpful or like responsive to your question?
Yeah, I guess kind of. I mean, I often
Okay,
do that. Like it was kind of more like if I'm trying to like write down like word for word, exactly how the mechanisms and exactly what specific they're saying versus in the past, and maybe this is a wrong thing to rely on, but if like the speaker says, 3 sentences, you only write down like one, and then that's helped me evaluate what the material's doing in the debate by trying to like delete some of it so I don't have to think about everything at once, I guess.
I think it's risky. I think this is risky because if you write down one sentence and if you trust your memory and if you trust your evaluation, it's very likely that later in the debate, it might become a contention in terms of did they said it or we said it in the panel. And then if someone else will be capable to quote the speaker and you will say, no, but I think they said this. And they ask you when, in which moment, with what words. And if you will not be capable to say, that it's a very likely that people will interpret this as your potential bias or your addition to the case. That's, I think it's a difference. When I understand that some people don't need to take more notes, but every single time when there will be prolonged the discussion or close call, it might be problematic. So I would say better have more notes and less self-evaluation than reverse, because you can make the self-evaluation during the 3 minutes when people are reading their own calls, right? Or you can make the self-evaluation during discussion when you see where people disagreeing, when the other panelist is talking, you are like, okay, they're talking about this, but I will wanna shift the discussion or focus about that. What were my thoughts about this? If you were capable to generate these thoughts in the real time when the debate was happening, that you were thinking about this, you might have had your brain somewhere else and missed 2 or 3 sentences from the speaker, which were important. But B, unclear why you couldn't do it later, right? like why it was so precious that if you will put 2 sentences, that later you will not be able to change this. Is that more helpful response?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I just need to change the way I judge, which is fair enough. Yeah, thanks.
I mean, look, if it's working for you, then keep your way, right? It's just there always will be one debate where you realize that some of the I don't want to call it laziness. I think some of the preferences might be challenged by the other judges, and then you will be like, yeah, they're right. So sometimes if I realize that my tracking, for example, it's weaker than the other judges because of multiple reasons, right? Like someone spoke super fast, my pen stopped working, I'm CA, so I said the motion and I thought that this was obvious. I'm less stubborn or I'm less cocky in how I'm arguing because I know that I might not be correct and I don't want to create, certain issues or certain misconceptions. All right. Do we have another questions? Because I think we are moving to Q&A section. Yes, Yuki, go on.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so recently I'm having difficulty in making my decision while tracking every 8 speeches. The question I have is how and when do you make the draft for your OAs? For example, like do you end up making draft for OA right after the end of speech of DLO, or do you don't do that before, the OPWIP? I have a question about when you organize your draft for OAs.
So I think there are 2 questions, right? I do think that after the top half, you should have some decision. You should have some vibe. Is this OOG winning? Is this OO? The reason for this is that this is the purest comparison, which should not be affected by anything what's happening from the back half, right? Like OG gave their claim, OO, you can't be derivative. You have the direct way to respond. Obviously, you already see if DPM or like if DLO added some new stuff which DPM couldn't engage. However, you don't need to have OA yet. Presumably, you already circle the clash, or you already write very briefly for yourself what's your reason to pick OG over OO. For example, like engagement, or like this argument, or like lack of impacting, lack of weighing. You have some brief. So I'm not saying you need to have OA ready, but you would be capable. If someone would stop the debate right now, there would be like a fire alarm, and then teams are, okay, I know there was fire alarm when we canceled this round. This actually happened, just to be clear. This is literally the life scenario. I know that we canceled the round and it didn't happen, but if you would need to give a call between OG and OO, who would win and what would be the feedback? So if someone would ask you this question, I think you want to have some idea, right? You don't want to keep longer, but also if you will not force yourself to evaluate the debate as the debate is going, and if the debate is messy, if it's a lot of content, it will be very hard for you later to pick everything up, like, combine and then make decision. So I would say the rationale why OO beat OG should be immediately. In terms of the OA, maybe I'm the type of person who don't prepare their OAs. I'm just like, okay, I finished deliberation, I gave up the ballot, let's go. But I think it's because, as I said, I have a very simple structure. If I have some I'm always giving the call. People hate waiting for the call. I hate waiting for the call, but also if you will give me 10 minutes of general comments, I want to know to what kind of place I'm fitting the general comments. So firstly, I'm giving the call, then I'm telling some of the stuff which were messy in the round, or some stuff which affected the call as a whole, or some stuff which people will benefit, or something which could be like, useful for the motion, or which would make the debate more interesting. So I'm giving this as a general feedback, not as a rational, so people know that this is not, super connected in the decision. I'm usually differentiating. And then I'm like, okay, OG versus OO, what happened here? And I'm giving quick brief. So me personally don't need time to write it down. But I would say if someone needed, during the discussion already, you put, for example, like OG versus OO or OO versus OG, 3 dots below, like what were the contentious points. And then this is how you are preparing. So basically, if you are a solo chair, obviously you have 15 minutes when you are reaching the discussion to came up and give the feedback. If you have one panelist and you want to include all of the thoughts, you are asking panelists question, you are writing down the response, and you are like, organizing this in few points. If you have like a two panelists, if they're discussing, you're also like, okay, what's your thoughts? 1, 2, 3. So that's how I would structure then the OA. If you need more time, then give your ballot, take 2 more minutes and be like, okay, this clash was the closest. It was about the quantity firstly, then it was about the scale, then it was about like the vulnerability. And you're just writing the key words, because obviously if you will write too much and if you start reading your OA, speakers will be like, excuse me, are these your words or your panelists? What are you doing here, right? So it's still like, sometimes it doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to fit into the check. So if you also want to ensure if you have your OA ready, you are checking, am I capable to respond why OG beat OO? Check. Am I capable to respond why OG beat CG? Check. Am I capable to show why the CG fall below OO? Check. Do I have justification why CG beat CO? Check. Do I have justification why CO lost to OO? Check. Do I have justification about CO and OG? I need to think a bit. Okay, did POI influence this? No. Did weighing the preemption for OG was there? No. Was the extension and the rebuttal from CO enough to take over? Yes. So this is the sanity check, which you can make before giving your OA, right? But yeah, is this responding to your question?
Yeah, thank you. Very useful.
Awesome. Do we have another question from someone? Okay, Samuel and Clarissa, and then we will come back to Kay.
Hi, Claudia. My question is the following. You just mentioned about like messy debates and how to organize ourselves, but my question is like when we see the material is in a Teams analysis, but it's not that clear, especially because it is messy. The speech can be confusing sometimes, but we know the materials, that we know the reason and the idea behind that speech. How to control ourselves in terms of like not completing a certain team or debater's argumentation, like how to control if we're not adding something as we analyze their idea and their material in the debate.
Okay, so the average scenario is you have 3 people in the panel, or like you have 2 people in the panel. So you do sanity check between each other, right? So you're like, okay, please tell me how you understood DPM case. And they are like, I understood it like this. And you're like, oh, really? I think they were going in a different direction. And then they're like, no. Look for the illustration which they gave, or like look for the mechanism. And then you were like, oh yeah, that was the argument which I tried to complete in my head because it was on the spar like a week ago. So ideal scenario is you are checking with the other person. If all of you misunderstood what the speaker said, it's very likely that it was very messy. Or you need to unpack what speaker said. So you are checking, okay, what speaker said they will prove? Okay, what context they gave for their case? Okay, what mechanism or like what's the way how this case is being proven? Okay, what's the way up or what's the comparative to this case? So you're asking yourself question one by one, because then someone else might say, oh yeah, no, they definitely had comparative. And you are like, excuse me, where? And they are like, oh, in the rebuttal to the other speaker. So that become, if you ask the questions one by one and trying to build the argument, then you can deal with a messy team and see exactly if they found this. Sometimes it needs to take a bit longer and you're scrolling all of the speech and you are looking for the word weighing, or you're looking for the word response, or you're looking for the word which is like a buzzword for this particular claim, right? So to summarize this, I would say if you have the panelists, don't wait and don't presume, just ask. Or be like, okay, guys, my call will be that false, but just out of the get-go, I think CO is the team the hardest to place in the debate because I have no idea where they're going, or like, I'm not sure if I understood their extension in the following way. And then you might be like, okay, so I will firstly start, okay, this is what I'm getting from CO. Anyone else? Like, can you tell me if this is correct? Or like, can you tell me if this was like under the motion? And someone is like, no. What they were trying to say is this one. I can tell you when it might happen. So Polish team was very famous at one competition because it was a debate about abortion. I think it was some of that kind of debates, right? And unfortunately, in Polish language, condoms are preservatives. So imagine the judges' confusion when speakers were talking about preservatives all the time in the debate, and they were not necessarily connecting what the fuck is happening, or when people are talking about the labor law or about the work with the environment or about the words which are coming from a different context. Sometimes it's really hard to connect that kind of stuff. So it's good to, like, clear this up before coming up to the team. So now you're finally summarizing. I would say A, make the usage of the people in your panel. B, break down the claim like one by one. This claim which they said, is this premise, is this mechanism, is this impact, go out. If not, okay, this is my interpretation. Or sometimes you also mention in your OA being like, here is what I think you tried to do, but not all of the panelists understood it that way. Be mindful for your language, be mindful for, like, not necessarily for the language, it's just like how you illustrate things. Just to be clear, it's not that if someone is using more, like, easy language, it's being problematic. It's just sometimes people prepping in their native language and then trying to translate to English, and then we are seeing interesting translations, and that's when the issue happening. This what happened to me. Since I'm prepping in English, it's way less, but when I was prepping in Polish and trying to translate grammar directly to the English language, like very hard. So I think it's important then to mention this in the OA. Like you have, even I would say you have obligation to mention this in OA if the speaker was very messy or like it was up to your interpretation what actually they brought to the debate. Okay, is this helpful? Awesome. Okay, you had the other question.
It was kind of in a similar vein, but particularly in deliberations where the initial call is maybe like quite stark, even on the case of like a 1-4 comparison being like opposites for some panelists. Are there particular questions that you might like opt to start with in order to really directly figure out what the points of contention might be? I'm particularly also concerned about, like deliberation time and keeping efficient and making sure that obviously I'm hearing the other panelists, or like if I'm a panelist, that I'm actively being very efficient, but I don't know how sometimes to approach what exactly it is that needs to be said first.
So I think it's important to figure out what the confusion is, why the calls are vastly different. So I think sometimes when it's reverse, for example, the worst part is if it's one case it's OG/OO CG/CO and second case it's CO CG/OO OG. Then God bless, it will be long. But sometimes there are patterns which suggesting, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, it's a semi-final. We have top half going through, they have back half going through. Clearly, there is an issue on the extension level, or like what we're crediting as an analysis and a proven claim, what we are not. Or sometimes it's like, gov bench versus off bench, and both teams have different characterizations. For example, profits running very like radical one, and you're buying into it, and that's easy to solve, right? Because you just starting from the top half, you are taking, okay, OGO, walk me through like what you're getting here. And you are asking one panelist to explain to you to do the rundown and the second one to respond, and you're asking a question. And I would say that in my case, it's usually working. There was one debate. It was USDC, I think, quarter or semi-final 1 year when I was chatting, and out of the get-go, I was like, okay, guys, this was some philosophical moral debate when basically all teams were considered. Like I just finished the round and I was like, okay, it was such a mess that guys, what we will do, we will spend 10 minutes, but we will organize what each team said, so we will not be completing the sentences later. So you are asking the first person, tell me what OG brought. Anyone else have any more positive contribution to OG to add? No? Okay. OO, CGCO. Do you know what that prevents later? That when the debate will be ongoing, you will not have people intervening and adding the stuff. And later, for example, because you want to still push for OG, And you were like, oh yeah, but they said this. And you are like, excuse me, where? You had your 5 minutes to put what they said to where. So this is the most extreme situation, right? That you're sacrificing some time, and this is for out rounds, not for the in rounds. The sacrificing your time and breaking it down. For in rounds, I would say OGOO. If you know people reasoning, how people are judging the most basic comparison in the debate, if you are seeing what's their analytical rigor, what they think it's proven, what they think its impact, then you know how the rest of the call fall down. Because maybe someone it's like that was proven and you are like absolutely not, that was assertion, or like it was factually incorrect. So yeah, if you have an absolute mess, try to solve the riddle how you get there. So top half, and then it should go smoothly. And don't be afraid to side with the panelist, with one panelist, and unfortunately outvote the other one if you are confident in your call. If they both are wrong, I hope that you are persuasive and you are capable to push it. I think at some point someone needs to back down, right? Because you can't have 1-1-1 split in the in round. This is impossible situation. So I think there is always a way to find a consensus. The second thing which I would do in that kind of situation is, okay, let's see on the constructive. Okay, this constructive was equal to this constructive. Let's examine the engagement. Okay, they were less responsive. OO was less responsive than OG. That's a metric. 3, weighing. Do we get any weighing? 0 weighing from both teams. Then I guess the engagement can be a tipping point. You just need to have the way to justify why the call fall in a particular direction. And I think this is one of the ways which you could try to do so. Is this helpful and responsive to the question? Awesome. Anna.
Hi, Claudia. So
Hello.
I have a question about clarity of OIs, because I think that this is something that probably hurts me the most when I'm judging. So could you give me some tips on like how to, prepare for the OI and make sure that like I'm clear and I include all the relevant stuff, I guess, because obviously in discussion you sometimes don't talk about certain obvious things, but you still need to include them in the OI. So if you could have some hints, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I think if you want to be extremely clear and if you want to buy the teams and you are not sure, use the team structure to address this. So you can be like, okay, OG, you tried to prove 3 things, or you told me that you will be talking about 3 things in this debate. Then if you pick up correctly what they told you as their flagging, or what they told you as their strategy or their framing, then you're good already, right? Like they are already like, okay, I was heard, this is correct. So you are starting, this is what you tried to prove. Here is what I think you proved and where. So I think in this argument, you use this mechanism. I think it worked in 80% of scenarios. My question still is why I care about this. And you are not telling me until, for example, closing half, which will give me the rationale later, which I will discuss. Or you are giving a competing analysis because I don't know why it's significantly better than what the op team is saying, right? So yeah, I would say that make the structure of the team to address their points if you are unsure. B, always divide the feedback to 3 parts. Take out the constructive material, so the arguments, take the engagement, and take the weighing. Sometimes you might take framing or characterization into account, but these 3, I would say, are minimum and like a basic, because then people know how to navigate your thinking, right? They'll be like, okay, so I gave 2 arguments, they gave 2 arguments. The question is how we engage with each other. Okay, they gave 2 arguments, we gave 2 arguments, we responded, they responded. Where's the weighing, right? So I would say this would be my 2 advices for the language. A, use the structure of the team. B, use the structure constructive engagement, weighing, and explain in which, and then the 3rd part, if you need it, it's like, okay, why I value this clash over another clash. Here is what teams agreed explicitly. here is what teams agreed implicitly and why I think it was implicitly. For example, you might say, oh, you never mentioned that this is like important, but you all discuss kids, like, or like the younger generation. So I assume this is important metric for this debate as a secondary question. If you need to go to the third one, also admit this, right? So you said, okay, explicitly, implicitly, and now what the average voter would take care about, or like what us as a panel would take care of, right? So that's how I would structure and think about what kind of language to use. And if you think sometimes someone was less persuasive because you couldn't depict the case, give the examples how this claim might be interpreted. So usually I'm telling people, if you're telling me there will be backlash, so what? How does backlash look like? The backlash can be, I'm angry, I'm locking the door, I'm going under my sheets, and I'm crying, eating ice cream, and watching a movie. Sometimes I might be angry, I might take the chair, go outside on the street, and trash some window, or like, you know, try to fight someone. Sometimes I might go and vote for another politician out of spite, right? Like, give people the example why, for example, it was hard for you to pick up their claim or be persuasive based on what they said, or tell them what were interpretations to their claim. And that's very basic language, because as you can imagine, I have no idea how the nice English language look like. I'm a very basic person, but it's just like, if you keep up with that kind of, you know, rules, then it's very hard to accuse you of not being fair or not doing something properly, etc. Do you have any follow-up question to this, or it was sufficient?
No, that's very clear. Thanks so much.
Okay, do we have another question? Go on, Krish.
So kind of on a similar vein to Anna, what is your advice on being like efficient and clear as a panelist, especially when you have different calls?
So similarly, I would firstly say, what was your metric to have the different call, or like what you will think was decisive? So if you have the different call, if you will tell me that your different call was because you think that the team was very good in responses, I would be like, okay, checking my notes. Yes, they said responses. I just don't think that they were more than mitigatory, and I don't think that they address the core of the prop thing. So I'm thinking now, if you are my panelist and if you told me that you credited responses, I know that I need to ping to you the constructive point which I think was left and unresponded, or which I don't think was responded properly, and then I can navigate the discussion. So I think anytime when you are giving your call, you can say, but you also be honest, right? Don't say this all the time. So you giving your call, but you are unsure if you're buying more OO or CO. You think both had good responses. You are like, okay, my call is OG, OO, CO, CG. I can be flipped on the up bench based on how we evaluate certain responses. That's concise, that's quick. You are not saying things which I didn't ask you, you're just adding one sentence, but that sentence gave me information how I can, like, what I can ask you, or like where I can put you in the discussion to respond in comparison to the other panelists. Alternatively, when I ask you, okay, what was the contribution from OG? Contribution might mean the three things, right? You might say, okay, in terms of contribution, I saw one positive case, I saw one good point of rebuttal, and I saw one good weighing. Or you might say, I think OG contribution, they tried to prove three things. I think they proved one. I don't think they delivered analysis on this one. And you see, it take me 10 or 15, 10 seconds or 5 seconds, but I'm giving you the information which you can work with. I'm already seeing that maybe if you think that only one argument was proven, that the other constructive was not persuasive. Or if you're telling me that they had only one response, I'm seeing that maybe you not consider the response which wasn't strong as response. So I know what I need to bring to your attention. Or if you are mentioning the material, which I think clearly it's off clash, it's out of the debate, but you are buying it. And maybe you also mentioned something like, I love this motion, or like, I love STEM and I'm an expert in STEM. Maybe I know, aha, Okay, so maybe this is like, some buzzword which the non-average voter understands. So I know that I need to get your attention. Would you be capable to understand, like, was this understood to you from the mechanism, or you just know the argument? So basically, every single time, just gave a hint how to approach you. It's basically like you meeting someone and you want to know what the topic or what they like just suggest like in what way, because then it's way easier to structure the discussion or to ping some stuff. The worst thing which you can do is starting me explaining your call in deep detail when I didn't yet hear the whole panel, when I didn't yet had like the way to position my thoughts, and I'm already being annoyed because I'm not sure if I'm still listening or if I'll lose you. It's better always to say a bit less and finish with, do you want me to elaborate on any of these points? And chair will appreciate this, or like panelists will also appreciate that kind of stuff. In general, like, it's very simple. If you are polite, if you are following like certain directions, people should be capable to work well. Okay, is this responding to your question?
Yep,
Awesome.
thanks so much.
Brian, you're next.
Yep, hello. So on the flip side, if you're the chair and sometimes you have some perhaps less experienced panelists who might not be as aware of this kind of way to make it concise, they might go on some tangents or they give a very detailed call, and you want to make sure you're on time. Are there some tips to like kind of preempt this from happening, or make sure they don't feel like being rudely cut off, etc.?
Oh yeah, you're saying, okay, you have 1 minute and you are literally putting a time and you're showing them the time. I don't think it's rude. I think everyone who knows the rules of judging, they know that you have 15 minutes to come up with the decision. Sometimes you might apologize, sometimes you might compromise, like the thing which I'm compromising sometimes at this point, but I'm judging for like 8 years now. I'm like, okay, speaker points, this bracket, I know, so we will not be reading the speaker scale and reaching everyone the bracket, but you can't compromise hearing people's thoughts and like rational for the decision, right? So you might be like, okay, guys, we need to go through the clashes. Can you briefly, like 1 minute summary, or like, can you give me like one sentence, like, devil advocate or whatever towards the point. Speaking of which, Marta, what time your session is starting? If I'm not running overtime.
At 45, so you're not running overtime, no worries.
Okay, perfect. That means, Brian, is this responsive to your question? I think it's not rude if you will be timing the panelists, or if you said you have a minute, or you have 2 minutes, or you will be like, I'm really sorry, I need to interrupt, but we are short on time. I know where you're going. I will come back to you. Okay?
Yeah, I think that's helpful because I think I'm just a bit hesitant of like whether you want to like just time it and feel like really rigidly holding the conversation. But I'll try that next time.
Yeah, but if you will not do it, then you're risking that one person will speak for 5 minutes, and then you have the other panelist, which is like, what about me? You gave me like 30 seconds, but I also wanted to speak for 5 minutes. Now the other panelists will get the better feedback. You will give them like 9, and what you will give me like 5 because I spoke, shorter. So I think this is also like a good rationale to tell people, if you feel not confident doing this because you feel people will think you are rude, you will be like, look, everyone, we have a very strict 15 minutes. I don't want to piss Klaudia and Geneva off, or like, I don't want Tab to came here. Let's start with everyone justifying for like 30 seconds or 1 minute. If you will have questions, we will be coming back, right? Because the discussion in the panel is also like a ping pong. You don't want to have a monologue. You don't want, one person to speak for majority of time. All right, awesome. In that case, we have time for the one last question before I will pass the mic to Marta. But yeah. 3, 2, Owen, go for it. The last one, you want.
Yeah. So again, when you're a panelist, what would you, I guess, like recommend on like how long to know to speak for if the chair isn't doing that? Like give X number of seconds? Because like I've had feedback I'm too short or sometimes I'm too long. So like how does you get a vibe for like how much the chair is like actually wanting you to say?
So I would say that for every chair, the less the better, because I can always ask you for follow-up. But sometimes if you start, describing me all of the context or going word by word, even if I will interrupt you after a minute, I will not get this minute back because that was something which wasn't very useful. But if you will tell people, please be concise, or like you have a minute, you will be jumping to the thing which you think is crucial, which is the most important to discuss. If I will decide that I need more input from you, I will ask you as a chair. And I think every chair would do so. I think what the worst thing which can happen is that you're starting responding. I'm like zoning out. I'm there trying to figure out what you're talking to me or like why this is relevant. And then I still need to clear up this discussion. So if you will sometimes go for too long because you go for too much for details, I still need to reuse my time and do it again, which is again not very helpful and not the best way. I hope that's responding to your question.
Yeah, that helps. Thanks.
Awesome. All right. So just to summarize from this session, if you have any question, you can message me. I'm quite slow now in responding because a lot's going on, but I'll try to get back to you. But just to summarize, remember what speaker expectation is and what they are putting their effort in. If the speaker spend a lot of time on one argument and this argument only, presumably they want you to at least acknowledge this. You don't need to spend a lot of time in your way. You might be like, I know you prioritize this argument. I will explain briefly why I think it wasn't the most important in this debate, or why I think it was outframed, or why I think it was rebutted. But let the speaker feeling that you heard them. The second of all, if you feel confident and if you know that you will be capable to respond to the questions, pause after each comparison and ask if someone have a question to rational. Maybe you missed something. Maybe this will be something which will be helpful. Maybe it will avoid people, if they will not be able to find you for personal feedback, feeling you the negative feedback initially. Thirdly, try to use the words which speakers are using themselves. If you will be paraphrasing and summarizing for the OA, keep the speaker's words for personal feedback, because sometimes you are like, oh, but I did flagging, or like I did weighing, and then you are like, do better one, and you are like, oh, thank you very much, like do better, but better what, right? And then you might be like, you said XYZ, I think the Y was there unnecessarily, I think the Y required being a separate point. And then the speaker is like, okay, thank you. So this is the level of nuance which people will be expecting. This is the level of nuance which could be helpful. That being said, I hope you found this session useful, similarly to the whole academy. Thank you very much for your participation, and I am passing over to Marta. Yay!